Here is the story of Walter McMillan. Walter McMillan was born on October 27th in 1941 and lived in a black settlement near Monroe where he grew up picking cotton. It was a dirt-poor region of pine trees and bean farms. Walter purchased logging and paper mill equipment and became a moderately successful businessman. A journalist describes him as a black pulp woodworker. In 1986, he had been married to Minnie McMillan for 25 years and they had 9 children. McMillan held 2 jobs and no criminal record. Other than a misdemeanor charge stemming from a barroom fight, he did not have a history of violence. Walter was known in the small community for having an affair with the white woman, Karen Kelly. In addition, one of his sons had also married a white woman. Both Walter and the attorney he had in 1987, J.L. Chestnut, contended that Walter's relationship alone had made him a suspect. In a prison interview in 1993, Walter said, "The only reason why I'm here is because I have been messing around with the white lady and my son married a white lady." Walter was arrested and charged with the murder of 18-year-old Rhonda Morrison, a white dry cleaning clerk who was murdered at Jackson Cleaners on November 1st, 1986. She had been shot numerous times from behind. At the time of her murder, Walter McMillan was at a church fish fry where he was seen by dozens of witnesses, one of whom was a police officer. Walter had no prior felony convictions, was arrested by newly elected Sheriff Tom Tate. Tom Tate was under the pressure to find a suspect. McMillan was arrested in June 1987. Walter was immediately sent to Alabama's death row in Holman State Prison, which is usually reserved for convicted murderers awaiting execution. He was held there pre-trial for 15 months. Walter had explained to Sheriff Tate shortly after his arrest that he was at the fish fry on the morning of November 1st. Tate replied, "I don't care what you say or what you do. I don't care what your people say either. I'm going to put 12 people on the jury who are going to find your God D. Black A. guilty." On December 11, 1987, Walter McMillan and Ralph Bernard Myers were jointly indicted. McMillan was charged with the 2-count indictment for the offense murder made capital because it was committed during a robbery in the first degree, and the jury recommended a life sentence. Myers pleaded guilty as a conspirator in the murder and received a 30-year prison term. The trial began on August 15, 1988, and Judge Robert E. Lee Key Jr. had Walter await trial on death row, as if a death sentence was a foregone conclusion, and relocated the trial from a county that was 40% black to an overwhelmingly white one. The trial was relocated in Baldwin County, where 86% of the residents were white. The trial lasted only a day and a half. On August 17, 1988, the jury of 11 whites and 1 African American found Walter guilty of the capital offense charged in the indictment. A life sentence was recommended based on the testimony of 4 state informants found by the prosecution: Ralph Myers, Bill Hooks Jr., Joe Hightower, and 1 other one. 2 of the witnesses claimed to have seen McMillan's lowrider truck outside the dry cleaners around the time that the crime occurred. The jury ignored multiple alibi defense witnesses who were black and testified under oath that he was at a fish fry at the time of the crime. There was no physical evidence implicating Walter. 6 years after the original trial, in an unrelated case, the Alabama Court of Criminal Appeals found that the prosecutor, District Attorney Theodore Pearson, and Judge Key had practiced intentional racial discrimination in jury selection. On September 19, 1988, Judge Robert E. Lee Key Jr. overruled the jury's recommendation a life sentence and imposed a death penalty. Judge Key said that Walter deserved to be executed for the brutal killing of a young lady in the first full flower of adulthood. What Judge Key did was a practice called judicial override. It allows elected trial judges to override jury verdicts of life and impose death sentences. Since then, the frequency of the judge override in Alabama has come under scrutiny. Nearly 70 Alabama judges have single-handedly ordered an inmate's execution, and collectively they have done so more than 100 times. 36 of the nearly 200 convicts on death row are because of the override. In November 1988, 28-year-old attorney Brian Stevenson took on the task of appealing the case. He visited Walter in prison, and Walter maintained his innocence. Brian Stevenson was motivated to take Walter's case because of the use of the judge override. After he decided to take the appeal, he got a phone call from Judge Key discouraging Stevenson from taking the case. Brian Stevenson described how that phone call was a very, very bizarre start to his career and to the work that he was doing in Alabama. Brian visited Walter's community and met dozens of African Americans who were with this condemned man at the time the crime took place 11 miles away, who absolutely knew he was innocent. From 1990 to 1993, the Alabama Court of Criminal Appeals turned down 4 appeals. McMillan's conviction and death sentence were affirmed in 1991. Following his own trial and sentencing, Ralph Bernard Myers told Walter's trial counsel that the testimony he gave against Walter was false. Myers confessed that he knew nothing about the crime, that he was not present when the crime was committed, and that he had been told what to say by certain law enforcement officers. He said that he testified falsely against Walter because of the pressure from the officers. On February 23, 1993, Walter McMillan versus State in the Alabama Court of Criminal Appeals, the state suppressed evidence that had been requested by the defense, thus denying the appeal in due process of law, requiring the reversal of the conviction and death sentence, and the remand of the case for a new trial. Further investigation revealed that Walter's truck, supposedly seen by witnesses at the scene of the crime, had not been converted to a lowrider until 6 months after the crime took place. It also emerged that District Attorney Theodore Pearson had concealed evidence proving his innocence. The two witnesses who had testified that they had seen Walter's truck retracted their testimony and admitted they lied at trial, committing perjury. Walter's lawyer discovered that prosecutors had withheld evidence and that the state's star witness had lied. It emerged that Sheriff Tate and investigators with the Monroe County DA's office and the Alabama Bureau of Investigation had pressured Myers into lying about Walter. Pursuing the claims, the attorneys obtained the original recording of Myers' confession. After listening to it, they flipped the tape over and discovered a recorded conversation in which Myers complained bitterly that he was being forced to implicate Walter, whom he did not know for a crime neither of them had any role in. On February 23, 1993, in his fifth appeal to the Alabama Court of Criminal Appeals, the judges ruled 5-0 to reverse Walter's conviction and grant him a new trial. Walter's attorney then filed a motion to dismiss all charges. Chapman, who did not prosecute the original case in 1987, joined the defense in seeking to have the charges against Walter dismissed. However, Chapman did not agree that there had been a deliberate effort to frame Walter. He claimed that Walter's exoneration proved the system worked. Brian Stevenson disagreed, telling the court that it was far too easy to convict this wrongly accused man for murder and send him to death row for something he didn't do, and too hard to win his freedom after proving his innocence. Walter McMillan was exonerated on March 2, 1993. Later, McMillan developed dementia believed to have been brought by the trauma of imprisonment, and he died on September 11, 2013.